we're going to reconvene in open session now. So the first thing on our agenda is awards and recognitions. Superintendent Kirby.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our March board meeting. What is it, March? March, right? Yes, March. Okay. We are excited to have the opportunity to recognize our Cleveland Heights University Heights staff members for their continuous efforts and great contributions to creating a culture of excellence for our school district and all of our communities. We have several chosen honorees here with us tonight, each nominated by a colleague to be our Tiger Team members of the month for the month of February. We want you to know that we really appreciate all that you do, and your efforts do not go unnoticed. So when I read your name, please come forward to receive your certificate and take a photo. Maya Smith from the Board of Education. From Boulevard Elementary School, Julie Walker. From Canterbury Elementary School, Jacqueline Young. From Delisle, Brian Bailey. From Fairfax Elementary School, Kiera Nelson. From Garrity School, Karen Golenberg. From Cleveland Heights High School, Michael Jones. From Monticello Middle School, Jason Jeske. From Noble Elementary School, Tony White. From Oxford Elementary School, Amnia Abu Saleh. From Roxbury Elementary School, Madison Tusher. And finally, from Roxborough Middle School, Melissa Montag. So our board president would join us for a picture. All right. Next, we are so excited to announce that our district is taking the next steps forward in strengthening our family engagement practices. Our district will be one of only 96 districts working over the next 3 years to implement the National Network of Partnership Schools. Our family engagement specialists, along with our building leaders and key staff, will be working with the statewide Family Engagement Center and the state support team to build partnership schools. We are moving forward with both Monticello Middle School and Noble Elementary School for full fall implementation. The Epstein Framework, which is a framework that I was aware of in Chicago, nationally known, highly recommended, has been endorsed by our Family Engagement Task Force and aligns with our work towards the district goals. NNPS is a nationally recognized evidence-based framework built by 30 years of research. It is a goal-oriented, collaborative approach built to specifically support school improvement and student learning. I'm going to invite Lisa Hunt, our fabulous family engagement coordinator, up to speak.
It is exciting news. We are, I think, invested in building this practice because it's about collaboration and co-creation and focused on student achievement and school improvement. So when we talked about doing more or doing less, the Epstein framework allows for us to look at what we do and being fiscally responsible and focused on goal-centered engagement practices is where we're moving. When we rolled it out, we looked at the buildings and we asked leaders to raise their hand. And I was really excited that Noble and Monticello were ones who raised their hands immediately. So I can't say enough about those schools, but also this framework is going to allow us to measure what we do, not just in the implementation, but in the progress. And so the great thing that the tools are there, and all we have to do is use them. The fact that we're getting grant funded doesn't hurt. We like to have substitutes and training and ongoing connection to actually really connecting with the Dr. Epstein. And I think that in itself is powerful. So, I'm excited to begin this journey, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the people who dedicated their time in looking at surveys and looking at what we do and coming around the table every month to ask critical questions around family engagement. So I want to turn it over to my task force. If you're in the house, stand up. Yeah, and thank you for your dedication. Thank you for the acknowledgement, and thank you for the work that we're doing. Thank you for your belief.
Lisa.
Thank you
all.
for your fabulous Heintz Family Academy.
Yes.
Oh, so we are going to invite Ms. Pronti from Monticello and Mr. Carpenter from Noble up to the front. Yeah. That concludes our recognitions for this evening. And now I am going to invite Braden Gallagher, who will report news from the high school to the board.
Oh, yes.
Is it okay if I close this?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There you go, B. Fire away, bro.
All right. Good evening, Board of Education members, Superintendent Kirby, and Mr. Gaynor. My name is Braden Gallagher, and I'm a sophomore at Heintz High. As a member of the Superintendent's student cadre, I'm here to give a brief report about what's happening at Heintz High and about my experience at the school. I'm honored to be here this evening. Thank you for the opportunity. First, I want to tell you a little bit about an athletic team update and about several upcoming events at Heintz High. The girls' basketball team ended the season with an 18-5 record and were co-champions of the Lake Erie League.
Nice.
Senior Haley Sims won Player of the Year in the Lake Erie League for the second year in a row. The boys' basketball team will play Brush at Euclid Heights this Thursday in the district semifinals. The team finished the regular season with a 17-5 record and were also co-champions of the Lake Erie League. The swim team had their best season in many years. At the sectional meet, the team had 3 champions, 1 runner-up, and 2 third-place finishers, and 2 relays qualified for the district meet. 8 individuals qualified for the district meet, giving us our largest showing in recent history. The wrestling team is also in the midst of their best season in many years. This team took 4th place at the sectional meet and will send 6 wrestlers to the district meet. Qualifiers from the district tournament will make the state tournament. And finally, the hockey team ended their season in the second round of playoffs in a thrilling game. The Tigers trailed by a goal with 2 seconds left in the final period and scored before the buzzer to send the game into overtime. The Tigers fell in overtime to end their season, but the bulk of the team returns next season. Here are a few important events that are happening at Heintz High. All juniors will take the SAT college entrance test tomorrow, March 4th. The annual Swim Cadet Show is March 5th, 6th, and 7th. This is a synchronized swimming show and is the longest continually running club at the school. The vocal music department will partner with the Singers Club of Cleveland for a concert on Friday, March 13th at 7:30 p.m. Heintz High will host the Northeast Ohio Suburban College Fair on March 17th from 7 to 9 p.m. in the competition gym. And finally, I'm a little excited about this. Spring break is March 23rd through March 27th. Now, I'd like to talk about a few aspects of Heintz High that have been important to me: the sports teams, the supportive teachers, and the diversity. I've been an athlete for 6 years, and I knew that I wanted to continue that when I got to high school. I'm on the cross-country, track, and baseball teams, and I enjoy these teams for 2 reasons. I've improved my skills, and I feel accepted and valued as a member of each team. Before high school, I'd never run competitively, and in just a year and a half, I've grown to love both track and cross-country. My cross-country has taught me how to push through in a race or in practice when the going gets tough. This advice relates to everyday life, and my coach helped teach me to push forward in life, school, and sports. The culture of the teams is that everyone is valued by the coaches and teammates, regardless of race, gender, or ability. We support each other to become better athletes, and that, in turn, makes the team stronger. The coaches at Heintz High are phenomenal. They know how to work well with and teach anyone. They also have a passion for their sport and seem to really enjoy coaching. They set the tone for the culture of the teams. They make everyone feel welcome and part of the team. The academic part of my life at Heintz High is unique and challenging. I feel that I'm getting a top-tier education and that the teachers, like coaches, work well with students and know how to help us. I always feel welcome to go to teachers after school or during lunch to get help. 2 of my more challenging courses are AP US History and Honors Algebra 2, and I've been to both these classrooms after school many times. I feel like I connect with my teachers, and they know me. Everything they do tells me that they care about me, and they truly want me and my classmates to succeed. The third thing I want to talk about is the school's diversity, but that's not really a separate thing. It's tied up into everything else about our school. It's part of our sports teams and part of the classroom culture and part of the hallways and our music program and the engineering program. Diversity is a part of who we are. It's part of the identity of the school. We might think of diversity in terms of race or economics or gender diversity, but we are diverse in backgrounds and interests and talents and perspectives and abilities. Everyone always says that Heintz High has something for everyone, that any student can find a group here where they belong. That's the truth. I see it every day in the hallways, on the stage, in the classroom, and on the field. Heintz High truly is for all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Braden.
Thank you so much, Braden. Now we'll move on to the next part of our agenda, which is public address, and we have a requested audience, Audrey Nguyen, for the 2020 census. So, Audrey?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, let's see about the technology piece. No. Okay, well, while he does that, I can get started a little bit. My name is Audrey Nguyen, and I'm a partnership specialist from the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm also a Cleveland Heights resident, a proud Cleveland Heights resident. And I come to you today as a partnership specialist, and what we do in Cuyahoga County and across the nation is we talk to governments, elected officials, community leaders, and we talk about the facts of the census.
Excuse me, Audrey, can you go to the microphone so
There we are.
the people on TV can hear you speak when
Okay.
they watch this on YouTube?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we do is we connect with those community leaders and trusted voices, particularly our school districts, to talk about the facts of the census, why it's important, and why we need the help of the community to make sure that we get the most accurate count possible in 2020. So I'm going to share some information with you tonight. So why is the census important? First of all, it's a constitutional mandate that we count the citizenry every 10 years. The results of the census are also responsible for apportionment of seats in the House of Representatives. And in 2010, if any of you remember, Ohio actually lost 2 seats in Congress. So it's important to get a good count so that we maintain our voice in Washington. Also, the census is responsible, the data from the census is responsible for redistricting at every level, including the district level, at the school district level. And I'm sure you can speak to the fact that school districts use census data for long-range planning. So it's important to have accurate data to have good plans in place from both a service standpoint and a budgetary standpoint. Also, the census helps communities plan for future needs. Businesses use census data in order to determine where they're going to expand, put new locations, build new plants, those types of things. And they rely on census data in order to tell them if their shopping population is present, are there enough people in the workforce in order to maintain their business. So these statistics and figures are very important. Also, Lisa mentioned grants. Census data is also used as support for grant applications. If an entity says that they're going to serve X number of people in a certain circumstance, the census will either confirm or deny that, and the granting institutions will use that data to confirm. And finally, and importantly, the data from the census is responsible for the distribution of $675 billion in federal funds, and that is every year for 10 years. And so the correlation is that areas that are undercounted will thereby be underfunded, which doesn't mean the need will go away. It just means that there won't be sufficient funding to do what a community needs to do. So what do these funds fund? Many of the programs that we rely on as a community to make sure that kind of everyone is coming along, not only Section 8 housing, Head Start, there's the SNAP and TANF benefit programs for the needy. Also, from a school district standpoint, Title I funding is based on census data, as well as a lot of support for students, such as free and reduced school lunches. All of these programs and adequate funding for the programs are dependent upon an accurate count of the people who live in a given district or community. So we understand at the Census Bureau that in 2020, there are some conditions in our community and in our society that make getting an accurate count of our population a little bit challenging. And some of those are the rapidly changing use of technology. Technology is being employed in much greater ways in the count for 2020, and we know there's a certain segment of the population that doesn't have a high trust level there. We are providing information to make people feel more comfortable, help them understand how the technology works and that it is not a threat to anyone. Also, distrust in government. Believe it or not. The distrust in government causes a lot of concern in the minds of some citizens about whether it's okay for them to provide their personal information to the government. What's going to happen to it? What happens when I submit my information? I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the safeguards in just a second. And then finally, the way we live now is so much more complex than it was in 1790 when the census taker rode the horse from farm to farm. Now we have, very different situations. We have people who are more mobile. They move more often. We have grandparents raising grandchildren and foster families and a number of different more complicated living situations that make an accurate count a little more challenging. So what about the distrust in government and the concern about data? Well, the census is confidential by law. Any information submitted by individuals is not shared with any other entity, no other government entity, whether it be federal, state, or local. So it's not going to the IRS, it's not going to ICE, it's not going to child support enforcement, anything of that nature, and that is by law. What happens when you submit your census data, the first thing that happens is that your personally identifiable information, which is your name, is separated from your demographics or your statistics. The Census Bureau is a statistical organization. That's all we're concerned about is the numbers, not any type of enforcement. When your data is separated from your PII, that data stays separate for 72 years. If anyone here has ever done family history research, you use historical census data to do that. Right now, genealogists are working with the 1940 census because it is the most recent census data available with names and demographic data. So we want to reassure people that their information by law is kept safe. Myself and everyone else who works for the Census Bureau, and no matter what capacity you're working in, we take 2 oaths, an oath of office. The second oath is a confidentiality oath that lasts for life. That if we violate and share any type of personal information that comes across our purview, then we are subject to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. So we're going to keep that safe. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about Cleveland Heights in particular. So we have some communities based on the 2010 response, as well as based on some demographic characteristics that we know are at risk for underreporting. We have a tool which is open to everyone. It's open to anyone that wants to look at it. It's called ROAM, a Response Outreach Area Mapper. It can be found at census.gov/ROAM. What it is a map of the United States that is divided by census tract. A census tract is anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 individuals, depending on natural boundaries and population distribution. But it shows each tract, and for each tract, the colors that you see in blue, the darker the color of the tract, the more at risk that tract is for an undercount. So if you take a look at Cleveland Heights, some of the northern and mostly northern areas, we are concerned about whether we'll get an accurate response or a full response from people living in that area. Some of the risk factors that we see in that case, one of them is renters. People who rent tend to respond less so to the census. First of all, they're more transient, they move more often, and some renters believe that if it has to do with where they live, then it will be taken care of by their landlord, which is absolutely not true. Every rental unit is a household as far as the census is concerned and should respond just like any other household, like a standalone home. And so some of the northern areas of our city have higher rental populations. A second risk factor for that is that our census takers are not able to have access to rental properties. They're secured, so we can't go in and knock from door to door. So the ability to remind and to reinforce is a little bit lesser in those communities. Another high-risk population and the most undercounted group in 2010 was children under 5. We're not really sure what the mechanism behind that is, but we understand that there are complex living situations, shared custody, joint custody, grandparents, foster parents, things of that nature. So which children should be counted? All of them. Everyone who takes a breath on April 1st, 2020, which is the Census Day nationwide, should be counted, whether that breath is on the front end or the back end. Everyone should be counted, because what happens is we undercount children under 5. We don't have another opportunity to count them again for another 10 years. School districts plan based on those numbers. Doesn't mean the children are not going to show up. They are going to come when they're school aged. So getting an accurate count helps us tremendously. As partnership specialists, we're working with pre-K organizations and collaboratives to talk to them about sharing the information with their families so that their families understand that it's important that you count every child. So that's all about I got ahead of myself. So that's about the children under 5. So there are 4 ways to respond to the census in 2020. The first is the newest way, which is online. So the online way is easy, quick, and secure. When you provide your response online, the data is encrypted as you enter it, which means that no one can read it or decipher it while you're entering. After you complete your census, your information comes out of the online environment, so it does not stay there, so it's not prone to hacking or anything of that nature. We're very fortunate in Cuyahoga County. Every library, including Cleveland Heights Library, has made themselves available in their computer resources for people to come in to take their census there if they would like to. There will also be trained staff available to assist people to help them through the survey. The second method is by phone, which means you will call in. No one should call you. So if you get a call for someone asking for your 2020 census information, that would not be legitimate. You should call in, and a number is provided. Also, you may respond by mail, which is the traditional way. You can use the paper form, complete that, and send it back by prepaid return mail. And then finally, the in-person interview, where an enumerator or census taker will come to your home and take your information for you. So what do we ask? The census is very straightforward. We want people to understand what's on the questionnaire. We know that this is a huge effort. It's the largest peacetime effort of the federal government, hiring over 500,000 people nationwide to conduct it. So we know that there is some possibility of people who are scamming or, trying to do things dishonestly. And the best way for people to avoid that is to be armed with information. So the census asks just basically, how many people live in your household? What are their names? What are their ages and birth dates? Are they male or female? Do they normally live somewhere else? Do you rent or own? What's your race? And what's your relationship to the other people? That's it. There's no information. You should never be asked about your social security number. You should never be asked for a bank account number or PIN number. You should never be asked for a donation. Those questions are not on the survey, and we are not seeking donations. So we want people to be armed with the proper information so that they can respond safely. So what's the timeline? It's very coming soon. So starting on March 12th, every household in America will receive an invitation by mail to participate in the census. That invitation will invite households to participate in those first two ways that I mentioned, by phone and online. We prefer those methods because they're quickest, easiest, and they're the most cost-effective from a taxpayer dollar standpoint. Each household, until they respond, will be notified a total of 5 times by mail. On the 4th notification, households will be sent a paper form. So if you have people who prefer to do the paper form, they can just wait. Just wait till that 4th notification and we'll mail you one. As soon as you complete the census, notifications will stop. Households that still have not responded after the 5th mail notification will be visited by census takers who will remind them to take, give forms if necessary, and in some cases, they will actually enumerate those households. So one important thing is that census takers will be moving through our community, so it's important to know how to identify them. Every police agency in the nation, including Cleveland Heights Police, have received a bulletin as to how to identify a census taker. How they'll be identified is that they have a badge, which is vertical, has a photograph, a chip, and the watermark of the Census Bureau. They'll also be carrying equipment, whether it be phone or tablet, and it will bear the 2020 Census logo on one side, and on the resting screen, it'll have the seal of the Bureau of Census. And so it's perfectly fine to ask for those credentials when someone visits your home. And also, if a person is uncomfortable, they can call the 800 numbers that are on those mailed entries, mailed invitations, or they can contact their local police department just to feel safe. So let's see. Finally, or not finally, but one more thing. What about other people who don't necessarily live at your home, but you're related to them? For example, what if grandma's in the nursing home? Do I count grandma? Or what if I have a child who's away at college? Do I count that child? Well, we have a separate operation that's taking place concurrently with the public count. It's called group quarters enumeration. It counts people who live in communal situations that are generally receiving services and are not related to each other, like nursing homes, hospitals, drug rehab, residential facilities, college dormitories, prisons. All of those types of facilities are enumerated in that way. It's generally a direct contact between the administrator of those facilities and the Bureau. We send them a document, a spreadsheet, and they send us back the information. So if you have a child that is away in college and living full-time in a dorm, you do not count them with your household. The two determining factors of who should I count? The first thing is, where does a person sleep most of the time? So what if someone sleeps a variety of places? They are at school, they're at home, here and there. The second question or determining factor is, where will that person sleep on April 1st, 2020, which is Census Day? So that's how you determine where a person should be counted. Our goal is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. Finally, there are jobs associated with the census. So like I mentioned, we're hiring 500,000 people nationwide. And in Cuyahoga County, census taker positions pay $22.50 an hour. So it's a great part-time job, second job for many people. Census takers make their own hours, anywhere from 5 to 40 hours a week. They're paid for expenses. And so we are trying to get as many people as possible across all communities in Cuyahoga County to become census takers, because it speaks to the effectiveness of the effort. If we don't have enough census takers to go out to all communities, then we're going to have a little tougher time counting people. This is also a great job for our high school seniors. You need to be at least 17 and a half to apply, 18 before the census effort ends, which is at the end of July of this summer. So it's a great opportunity for those students as well. And finally, we need your help. We need the help of everyone in our community to talk to your family members, your friends, co-workers, church members, to tell them about the census and why it's important. We're asking the school district to please communicate with the families, because you are one of the most trusted voices in our community, to communicate with families, to let them know, hey, it's coming, it's important, we all stand to benefit from it, and it's easy to do. And with all of our help, we can make sure that 2020 is our most accurate census ever. So that's all I have. If it pleases the board, I can take questions, or if not, I can, however you'd like to do it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for
much.
being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Important
for
work.
Thank you.
giving all the facts. Does anyone have any questions for Audrey before?
Well, you
we let her go?
answered the question I had about college students, so thank you.
However, college students who do not live in a dormitory, so they live off campus in like an apartment setting with roommates, they are responsible for reporting just like any other resident. So they still have to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you do not have to feel obligated to stay for the whole
No.
meeting, but we appreciate you being here.
My kids have already gone through high school and graduated.
All right. I hope they're doing well.
Yeah,
They are doing great.
Good.
well, thank you.
Hey, George? AC? Can we cool it down a little bit? You love when I ask you that.
Now we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda, which is statements from the audience. A couple of people have signed up to speak tonight. So the first one is Joan Spurl, who's going to talk about advocacy and levy.
Hello, my name is Joan Spurl. I am a resident of Cleveland Heights, and I am a parent of a ninth grader at Heights High School. I'm an early childhood educator and professional. And forgive me for not having finessed my remarks more effectively. I've been doing a lot of that recently, but I wanted to be here tonight to talk a little about the upcoming levy and some other advocacy work we've been doing. Like Superintendent Kirby, when I moved here 15 years ago, I had lived in Milwaukee, where I grew up, or Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. I lived in Chicago for 20 years. I lived in Somerville, Massachusetts for 2 years. And this was the first time I ever lived in a community that was was required to have levies because of an unconstitutional way of funding schools, to keep spending at the same level after adjusted for inflation. So levies that actually are asking more money of the taxpayers to keep the spending even. So even though you're asking the taxpayers to pay more, after you've adjusted for inflation, you're just keeping the spending the same. Well, that's very confusing and complicated, and I can see how people in our community are frustrated by that, because it's really unfair to all. And as I worked on levies over the years, I felt like I had no choice. I did feel like at some point we need to do something different, and I want to thank you all, and for the Heights Coalition for Public Education, the previous administration, previous board, and this board for taking it one step further in doing advocacy at the state level to ask for changes to this unjust situation, to call attention along with hundreds of people from around the state to the flaws in the report cards, as agreed upon by the Republican and Democratic legislators, that the report card needs to be scrapped. So thank you for that work, for going down to Columbus. I care enough about this and about our community that I went, after working on Wednesday, the 19th, I drove down, got there at 6:30, and I testified, 6 o'clock PM, and I testified at 3:30 AM Thursday. So I went down Wednesday and testified at 3:30 in the morning. We all know we have better things to do with our times than doing this levy work. I want to thank you, board, staff of Cleveland Heights administration, for also cutting spending these last years, trying to stretch the levy, for doing the hard work, day in, day out, month in, month out, year after year. You don't just do this work, you don't just step up at levy time and start to address the needs of this community and look out for low-income families and children in our community. You do it on and on and on and on. We have children who live, work, and play in these schools, or who have lived, worked, and played in these schools. And I think you and we all know that we share that concern for people who are less advantaged than we are. And again, you care about them and work for them all the time. You never stop. You're not just doing it when there's a levy up. You're doing it all the time in a positive, productive manner. I thank you for that. I find it perplexing that there are some that always assume the worst about an institution that I value so. I am so glad that that my husband and I didn't listen to the naysayers when we moved to Cleveland Heights from Chicago 15 years ago. We listened to the people who actually were in the schools, whose children attended the schools. I said, give it a chance. I was inspired by this book, How to Walk to School, Blueprint for a Neighborhood School Renaissance. That if I thought things weren't perfect in the school, because they're not perfect anywhere, I'd draw attention to issues, but I'd try to be part of the solution. I'd try to bring a solution. It's so nice to work in a team collaboratively on behalf of the common good, of the public good of all people in the community. That task force that just stood up here, I've served on task forces like that. I've served on PTA. I've had a gratifying professional life as an early childhood educator, but I can tell you what gratification there is in working in this community with these schools
Joan,
on behalf of
I'm sorry, I'm
everyone.
going to have to cut you off,
That's
but you've hit
fine.
your 5 minutes. Thank
I
you very
just want to
much.
share, I want to pass on some written materials to you, okay?
Okay, thank
So
you.
these are a number of articles about.
Joan, I need to cut you off,
oh,
I'm sorry,
sorry.
but thank you. We will take
Okay,
your reading materials. We
Those
greatly
are,
appreciate your time.
About the Koch brothers' efforts in various communities and ways to fight against them.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. And the next person is Adora Schmiedel, Equity and the Levy. Adora? Thank you.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Kirby. I promised at the beginning of the year that I'd be here every board meeting, and I'm keeping my promise. 12 years ago, I made a decision out of fear. Unlike Joan, I chose a different path. The Webster's definition of fear is an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by the expectation or awareness of danger and concern about what may happen. I was concerned about the next educational opportunities for my children. I let my realtor, my neighbors, and many in my immediate community influence my emotions and my concerns. I was worried about the ability of my local school to respond to the needs of a primarily African-American student base in an equitable and inclusive way. I was concerned about the fact that my local school compared poorly to suburban schools in more affluent areas. I am a child of an immigrant who came to this country to make sure his children and their children received the best education available. And so, I let fear dictate my choice, and my children went to a community school outside of the district. In 5th grade, my son sat down with me and shared the advantages that he thought he would receive from the local middle school. He told me that Monticello Middle School would mean that he was with a bigger group of peers who would challenge him to reach higher. Monticello Middle School would mean for him he could perform with an orchestra and have music be a part of his daily curriculum. It meant he would be able to try a sport. He was reaching on that one. He hates sports. He said it meant he could be more independent because he could walk home on his own. He convinced me. 3 years later, he is ready for high school next year. And I am embarrassed that I did not walk through the door myself to see what happens in our district's classrooms. As a woman of African descent, I will always be concerned about addressing the systemic inequity of systems in education and in others. But in my school system, I have found parents, board members, and administrators who also embrace this work. I have found teachers working hard to counter the barriers that children and families face to get the best education for their children. And most of all, my son has found a community that is creating in him a thirst for knowledge. On Friday, I watched over 190 student middle school musicians perform for a combined Roxborough and Monticello parent audience. Today, I was just coaching some students on their Model UN presentation because they reached out to ask me about Nigerian customs and traditions. And I knew my father would be proud. Also, because of one of his middle school teachers, my son will be trying out tennis. God help us. Monticello Middle School is not rated as an exceptional school. The state report card tells us that it is failing. We fail when we neglect to acknowledge that every student is not the same. That injustices in the past have created barriers to the future. The Cleveland Heights School District is full of schools tackling the hard work of making sure that every student, regardless of disparity in income, in privilege, and geography, can find their strengths and power through education. This is not easy work, and it is not simple work. We fail when we let fear drive our decisions. Listen to the facts, and then talk to a student, like Braden. So many excellent things happen in our schools. Make a decision out of courage. Courage that together we can continue to build up our students. Please vote yes for our school levy.
Thank you, Adora.
Thank you.
Next up, Gary Cantor, complaints to State Auditor Fraud Task Force. So Gary?
Thank you. I'm Gary Cantor. I live in Cleveland Heights. 1975 graduate of Heights High. This is the only school system I ever attended. I'm here to talk about my complaint to the State Auditor's Fraud Task Force. It's a complaint about fiscal mismanagement and a failure to communicate honestly. And I've been at this for a while too. This isn't the first time I've addressed this issue. 4 years ago, I spoke with Mr. Gaynor, former Board President Zucker, and former Superintendent Dixon about the exact same problem I'm going to describe, to no avail. They told me, as always, I was wrong, and why. But I wasn't wrong then, and I'm not wrong tonight. Ohio Revised Code 33-1507 and 9.03C expressly prohibits school districts from spending taxpayer money or resources in support of a levy. But as I have numerous times in the past, this school district did exactly that last fall, paying $34,675 for a levy campaign committee telephone survey of likely March 17, 2020 voters only. Here's the agreement. There was no board resolution to spend $34,675. Just a request with the proposal from the Supervisor of Communications to the Director of Business Operations, who approved the expense. This money was paid to a local public relations and political consultant named Our Strategy Group. Over the last decade or so, Our Strategy Group has been the district's PR firm and then switched hats and been the levy campaign committee's consultant, and then back to the district. And already this campaign season, as per the levy campaign's unaudited pre-primary finance report, Our Strategy Group has been paid $10,000. Our strategy group was deeply involved in crafting the levy campaign survey, along with district personnel and the company that would actually be conducting the phone survey. The survey design discussions began around September 23rd, that involved our strategy, the pollsters, district personnel, and continued through November 12. The actual survey phone calls to those likely March 17 voters were made between November 14th and November 18th. And that's per the report. Over a week prior to the survey, at the November 5th board meeting, the 5-year forecast was presented. It revealed an $8.8 million negative cash balance at the end of fiscal year 2022. At that same meeting, the Levy Finance Committee, based on that forecast, recommended a levy of 7.9 to 9.5 mils. And here it goes from Ryan Roosh. Our committee has carefully reviewed the financial projections for the CHUH school district. We believe that an operating levy of 7.9 mils is the minimum, yada, yada, yada. And at the same meeting, based on the LFC's recommendation, the board unanimously passed a resolution to put a 7.9 mil levy on the ballot. I'm going to skip it in the interest of time. So on January 15th, I filed a complaint with the state auditor's fraud task force, and it's since been confirmed that that there's an investigation in process. And about the same time, somebody posted a question to the district. After that forum, there was a question and answer that was going to be online. And so here was a question the district responded to. Can you explain how spending tax dollars on a survey for the levy doesn't violate a law that appears to specifically prohibit this? The answer is the CHUH Board of Education has a responsibility to determine community and awareness and attitude toward the school district before putting a levy on the ballot. The survey was not crafted or delivered in a way that would shape respondents' opinions or in a way to support or oppose a levy. Furthermore, the district utilized much of the questions in the survey to determine general community knowledge about our schools and what respondents feel should be prioritized in local public education. This information will help us in our upcoming strategic planning and furthering our mission of preparing.
Gary, your 5 minutes are up. Thank you very much for your remarks this evening. And that was all who signed up to speak tonight, so we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
I arrived after the sheet was taken. Is it possible to make remarks if I keep it short?
You need to come and sign the sheet, though, so we have your name.
Absolutely.
And you need to come and sign the sheet also, so we have your name for the minutes.
We can come up and sign it once you start. Thank you.
We just have to have your name for the minutes. Oh, he took your pen. Oh, okay.
Taken to using my own pen these
It's
days.
probably a good idea these days. They say it's the #1 way to stay healthy. Use your own pen. Seriously.
Okay.
Okay, so our next speaker is Michael Bennett, and he's going to speak on the levy. Mr. Bennett?
Good evening, and thank you for the late edition. I'll try to be brief. My name is Michael Bennett. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse. Not virus. I'm the proud parent of 2 Heintz Tiger alums They were here from K through 12 and adore. Your remarks are beautiful. Our family went through the same decision-making. We landed up in the Heights, and our kids had a great education. They were both scholar athletes, so it was really heartening to hear the comments earlier from the student athlete as well. And they both did great in college, and they're gainfully employed and almost off my payroll, which is a pretty good job in their mid-20s. We're working to get them totally off. And I owe that to the foundation they received at Heintz High School, from you and your predecessors and what you've helped this community build. So thank you for your service in doing all that. I am here to speak in favor of the levy. I've been talking to people about it, posting about it before the post got too toxic in some cases, talking to neighbors and friends, talking to district members, and I have to admit, at the beginning, I was on the fence. Once I learned more, I was all in. So I hope this does pass, because I think it's a vital levy for our students and our future. I have 2 points, and I'm asking for the board's help to help people like me help the district get this levy passed. There's some message points and to clear up some communications that I think might help. One is, I've heard from levy supporters, and I think it was mentioned at the League of Women Voters Forum, that were it not for the EdChoice expansion, the current levy that was passed in 2016 and went into effect in 2017 would have carried us through financially until 2023, in large part because of the fiscal responsibility of the board and the cuts that you made. I think that's an important point, and if there's a way that the board could reaffirm that in its own voice instead of through the committee members, that would help me explain that to other people and help them understand that this is a financially responsible district, and the state is really what's making us be in this position today. A corollary to that is that I've heard some concern from people I've spoken with that the state is going to fix EdChoice when they reconvene after April 1st. Personally, I have no faith in that. More power to them if they can do it. I know because the downstate districts are being affected, they're feeling a lot of pressure they didn't feel when it was just folks like us. But that doesn't mean they're going to fix anything, and it doesn't mean the fix will touch us. The fix could just help the downstate districts. We've seen the state do that in other cases outside of education. So I'm coming and fixating on the words up to before the millage and the levy. And I would ask if there's any possibility that the board could affirm or state that should the state fix the EdChoice problem after April 1st, you'd reconsider how much money is needed and only take the millage that is needed to replace the EdChoice loss that we're going to feel. I think a lot of people are waiting. They're saying, why can't you wait? I understand that you can't wait. Budgeting's involved. You need to know now what you're going to have in the fall. You can't wait till April because passing another levy in November is going to be too late. I get that. That's a complex argument. I think a simple statement saying that if the state fixes it, and more power to them, and our superintendent's done a great job helping lead that charge. Thank you very much. A statement to the effect that you only take the millage that is needed to replace the loss that's a direct result of EdChoice would be a powerful message that I'd be happy to share with everyone I know who's on the fence or even on the other side. May not make a difference because some people won't listen to reason, but I think it's an important point to make. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And we are going to discuss that tonight during the President's Report, your last comment. It's something that we haven't had the opportunity to discuss as a board of 5, which we need to do, so we will do that tonight. Thank you. So Mr. Drake, Charles Drake, is going to talk about the levy.
Thank you, members of the board. I didn't get a chance to prepare my remarks because I was working late with a client, but I have a couple of issues. I'm going to be quite blunt. Number one, I don't think this board has been fiscally responsible, and I will bring out the points. I'm going to take some shots at some people. Number one, when you negotiated the contract with Dr. Kirby, she doesn't live in the district. By home rule, you can't make her, but you don't have to pay her 10% of SCRS. That should come out of her paycheck. And I'm sorry, doctor, that you're part of this. Mr. Gaynor, you have the same problem. We pay 10% of your contribution to SCRS. What really got my gall was there are about 40 employees who are administrators who you are paying their contribution at the rate of 10% to SCRS. That comes to almost $485,000 a year. And I'm not going to name names, but I have the spreadsheets and I got them. I find that offensive as a taxpayer. I'm a high school grad. I graduated in 1970. I have 4 daughters I raised. 2 went to the Heintz system, 2 did not, for various reasons. But the fact that almost $500,000 a year is being paid for an employee's contribution to their retirement system when it should come out of their paycheck is reprehensible. I'm not going to talk about the 1% that you pay to the teachers, which I found, by the way, that you're paying 1% of the teacher's contribution to STRS on their behalf. That is reprehensible. The fact that you sold the Coventry School for $1 to the library to a board that you control is reprehensible. And now you're asking us for 7.9 million mils of additional money for you to mismanage is irreprehensible. And Mr. Gaynor, when he did the schedule or the budget for the transformation of the Wiley property, estimated it was going to be about $8 to $9 million. It was almost $20 million. That is crazy. You as a board, whether it is the current board members or the prior board members, have all been irresponsible to our money. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Drake. We're going to move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to consider the consent agenda?
So motioned.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call? Oh, do we have any discussion on the consent agenda?
No, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it was shared with us in advance. We've had a chance to review
Yep.
it. No questions.
My only question was, how many students did we think were going on the field trip to Columbus for HOSA? I saw that which grades were involved, but I had no sense of how many students it looked like. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a large number. I thought it was somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Mr. Posh? Yes. Mr. Heintz?
Yes.
Ms. Serini?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, moving right along, the next thing on our,
There's one action item under finance.
oh yes, there is one action under finance, that is the TSA third-party administrator. Gaynor, are you covering that?
I certainly will. So you see a lot of documents attached to this, but the gist of it is that we have a third-party administrator who is going to administer at no cost. They actually charge the various tax sheltered annuity companies to participate. They are going to manage 403Bs, 457s. We have a lot of hardship withdrawals and a lot of people who will withdraw money, and it requires.
Mr. Bennett, you might want to stay for just one more minute, if you have a minute.
I'll be coming right back.
Okay, great. Because we're going to talk about the thing you cared about.
But at any rate, that requires a lot of staff time, and
Yes.
there's a lot of issues and concerns about IRS compliance with the plan document. So this group, actually, there were 2 competing groups that we spoke with, both our preferred vendors of OASBO, and this is the group that actually worked with most of the vendors that we use for tax sheltered annuities and 457s. They'll come in, they'll make sure that the plan document is up to date and compliant, which it must be by the end of March. And they will also, they will provide a common remitter service, meaning that we send a single check to them and they send a check out to all the TSA companies that participate. And then they'll also work directly with employees to make sure that not only their salary reduction agreements are in compliance, but also, again, if there are any hardship withdrawals or any movement that needs to be made with the money, they'll facilitate all of that for us. So, and again, no cost to the district, which, it's kind of a win-win for everyone. So one of the ways that we generally try to, look for opportunities to be more efficient and make sure that we're in compliance, as those compliance requirements tend to increase by the year, so.
Right, nobody seems to remove regulations.
That is correct.
They don't get
It's
reduced.
more and more. So.
If I may, I think that this sort of thing is fantastic. Because what it does, it seems to me, is it puts genuine experts within a phone call of all of our employees. And it therefore reduces that responsibility being done under this roof, and everyone kept up to date on a constantly changing series of state and federal laws. So the fact that we have, with OASBO, under OASBO's guidance, found this ability is simply fantastic, and it's great. It is, as you described, a real win-win. So thank you.
So any further discussions about the TSA third-party administrator? So do I have a motion to approve the TSA third-party administrator?
So moved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Heintz?
Yes.
Ms. Serini?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
I just want to point out before we leave the consent agenda finance section, well, we did the consent agenda, but the tax rate resolution document that is under number 1, that is the standard thing that we would do if we were to do what Mr. Bennett had brought up in his comments about if there is some solution that comes out of Columbus. This is the mechanism by which we would either reduce the amount that we decide to collect or we would not collect. I know we'll have a little bit further discussion in my report and the board president's report, but I just wanted to point out to the rest of the board that that is the mechanism by which we would decide to collect less. Remember, the wording is up to a certain amount. Okay, so I just wanted to call that document to your attention.
Thank you, and that is available to the entire community to see through board docs.
Yep, under finance, it's the number 1 tax rate resolution document.
Hey, Jody, can I make a suggestion that we just have this conversation now instead of just
Sure.
drag it? Because
So you're asking for a motion to discuss it?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking
Okay,
for.
exactly. Okay, so do I have a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's bring this up on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Posh.
Okay.
Okay, so I know there has been a lot of requests from the community of if there is a miracle that comes out of Columbus.
That
Would-
was my wording exactly,
Yeah,
actually,
yes.
at a meeting a couple weeks ago.
And my first reaction is absolutely. I mean, of course, I would want the lay finance committee to be involved with at least looking at the numbers and helping us give an idea of, how much we would have to raise, along with Mr. Gaynor. But I know I'm in favor of it, so I'd just like to make sure we have a discussion publicly to see who is in favor and if anyone isn't in favor of, if we didn't have to collect the full amount, would we choose to only collect what we need? Or, if there was a real miracle, not collect any of it.
So, I mean, maybe we need to go back to chapter 1, just so everybody who is tuning in or sitting here sort of, I guess, understands this. So we have a 7.9 mil levy on the ballot, and part of that is calculated based on our losses to ed choice. Approximately $7 million worth of revenue we realize we're losing annually. So the state has sort of, in my opinion, put this red herring out there, and they've sort of delayed how they're going to be implementing ed choice, but they've sort of left a fear of doubt within our community that there might be some savior, a pot of money that would make us whole or make us partially whole. And I believe in the last iterations, and one of the, when we were doing our testimony in Columbus, there's on the table a $40 million one-time bucket of money that is up to the Ohio Department of Education to spread around to 600-some school districts that have been hurt. We have no idea how that would be spread around. We may get one 600th of it, or we might get something proportional to what we've actually lost. So the conversation came up, and it actually came up in an interview we had with the Plain Dealer on, well, don't collect it. I mean, maybe you should tell the community, don't collect it. And I think the few of us that were in the room at the time, it's like, well, we're not asking for anything more than we need. So, of course, if we got a bailout, I mean, one, we wouldn't have had the levy on the ballot timeframe, but we don't want to spend money, we don't want to tell people we need money, take it, then we don't need the money. I mean, if there was a way to give it back, we would.
Right. Well, and the first thing we had to do is investigate how that would even be done. So that was, walking out of that meeting was the first thing I said to Mr. Gaynor and Ms. Kirby was, let's figure that out. Number one, has it ever been done before? And we have found out that, yes, it has been done by one or two maybe districts. And we found out this is how they do it, through this tax rate resolution document.
Correct. Well, and I would just add to that, so I did speak with Brian Dunn at the county. He's the director of the Budget Commission. And so he's the one who mentioned that there were a couple of districts who found themselves in situations where there were levies that were passed that were ultimately found not to be needed. But it's rare, but it can happen. But that the tax rate resolution really is intended, districts are actually required to demonstrate the need for the tax levies that, again, we've joked about that in the past to say, well, what district doesn't need all the levies that they've passed? But I guess here we are with the possibility that if the legislature does make this miraculous fix, that we might not need it. And so, to Jody's point, this is the mechanism that the district would use. We would simply ask you to pass this tax rate resolution at a lower millage than what's reflected in the numbers you see there. So, and again, I agree. I think that would be the right course of action, to bring the Lay Finance Committee together to look at that and make sure that what we project we need based on what relief we get is, all consistent, but that's absolutely the way we would do it.
I guess my piece of this is, I will say unequivocally that, yes, I will support exactly what has been described, that if the leprechaun rides the back of the unicorn
In Columbus.
all the way from Columbus, and delivers that big pot of gold, that will absolutely be something that I will support, to lower the millage that the community will hopefully entrust us with. And, I say that, I use the word trust when I talk about levies, and it's a blessing of trust that this community has historically shared with us. It is a trust to fund a wonderful education. It is a trust in the worthiness of our students to pursue their dreams under our roofs. I was one of those students. My son is one of those students today, so this is something that I take very, very near and dear to my heart. My wife was as well. But it's also a track record. That trust has been earned, I believe, through the years. We are currently asking for the lowest, the 7.9 end of the Lay Finance Committee's recommendations. They had asked for, it's starting at 7.9 mils to over 9. And we asked for the very bottom end of that because we have committed to a continuing run of reductions. We have, for the past 3 years, reduced our operating expenses by $750,000 per year, and we are committed to continuing that at the same rate, if not more. We are currently asking for a levy to replace a 3-year levy 4 years later. So we stretched this levy. We have a track record of stretching this levy. And so I believe that we have earned more of that trust. So to repeat, as I said, I will say unequivocally that, yes, I will support a reduction of those tax receipts in the event that the state does what they have the ability to do. Don't hold your breath, America. It's been 25 years since the DeRolf case determined that Ohio's funding was unconstitutional. So unless you can hold your breath for 25 years, don't be too hopeful. But if they do, I'm all in.
Well, several people have asked me, what's the solution? Right? How do we solve this problem? And the only solution I see is for the state to fund Ed Choice vouchers from a different pot of money. There happens to be a very large one in Columbus called the Rainy Day Fund, which is not being used for anything, which is sufficient.
It's raining.
It rained all day today.
On public
Yeah,
schools.
right, but I was gonna say, which is sufficient to render every district whole and deal with our problem of being on the hook until next year's kindergartners graduate. That would be the miracle, and that's what I'm hoping for, and I keep encouraging people to, write the governor and suggest that this stuff come from a different place. Because then we wouldn't need the money from the levy.
Well, and I want to make a commitment to the community. I think, I can't speak for all of us, but I would ask you to join me, is no matter what happens on March 17th, on March 18th, it's full barrel towards getting this fixed.
Yes.
For a long term, because I realize that another levy is a short-term fix, and we need a long-term fix.
But we have
And-
gone from short-term fix to short-term fix to short-term fix. I mean, that's the system in place in the state, and
But
everyone has to
We need
do
to
it.
continue our advocacy
And
work.
we can't stop. Yeah.
As Joan Sporl mentioned, we've been stepping it up. We need to keep our foot on the gas. I'm inviting all of our elected officials to please come and stand with us. I've had many conversations over the last couple of days with city council people, mayors, and nobody's against continuing the advocacy. They want us to do it, and they want us to lead it.
And we
So-
need them to join us, because it's hard
Absolutely,
work.
and they want to join us. Everyone I've spoken to said, yes, I'm in.
Good.
So this isn't, there's the issue of we need to fix our problems in the short term, but we need to continue the long-term fix. I think that's really important to this community.
Well, as Ms. Schmidl, spoke to, we have systemic problems, and this is a systemic problem. And nobody can continue this way. We have to fix it at the higher level.
And just to answer the one other question that Mr. Bennett had in his remarks about, if it were not for Ed Choice, we would not need another levy till 2023. And even then, the millage would be less. I asked Mr. Gaynor to calculate that, and it would be somewhere in the 5.9 to 6.2 range if we had not had, it's kind of hard to predict what could have happened, but that is the estimate of what we thought we would have needed if there had been no Ed Choice. It's particularly this expansion that happened in the biennial budget where we lost $2 million overnight with the provision that removed the requirement that a high school student had to have attended a private or a public school before being eligible for a voucher. That was removed overnight, surprise.
What can we do? Okay, so we've had this conversation, and, did you want to?
Beverly has not
Yeah,
spoken yet.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this,
No,
Beverly.
well-
I don't want to put you on the spot, but,
No, well, Jim asked, what can we do? We can pray. I really don't think we can depend on the support in downstate, but in the event if that were to pass, or if they were to honor us with the money, I would support, a lower levy.
so mechanically, it seems like we're all in agreement. What can we do to give the community, so we've had a lot of words. The community can, run the tape for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Is there a statement that we can issue? Is there a resolution?
We don't have something written up, so we would have to write a
It's also-
resolution.
The other thing is that, I think what might be important is that the community understands that this is our goal. We can't fill in many of the blanks, though, until we see and digest the final bill that comes out of Columbus. There are competing bills at the moment. There's one in the Senate and one in the House, and the one from the House isn't even what the Speaker of the House wants. And so there's an enormous number of moving parts, and everybody is sort of lobbying. We certainly are. I really do believe that Cleveland Heights University Heights is the tip of the sword in Columbus in terms of leading the charge for fair and equitable funding of Ohio's public schools. I think that most of the people in Columbus would agree with that statement. And I hope that the community takes great pride in that, because the community is doing it. They're leading. We're not the ones leading. It is the community leading us. So I think it's more of a, I think what we're doing is maybe the best that we can do. And correct me if I'm wrong, because we don't know what the fix is going to be. We know what we want.
I think what we can do is we can vote to give staff the authority to draft a statement that outlines our position, which is we're not going to take any more money than we need if we are bailed out by the state. I mean, I'd love the unicorn language, but that probably shouldn't be in there, okay? But, I mean, it would be, and I would like to be able to release that, subject to, I don't know if legal counsel has to review it to make sure that we're all in compliance with all the things we need to be in compliance with.
I guess my concern would be, kind of as Dan has stated, that my experience with the state is that if they were to agree, as Malia said, to fund these directly, which is what we would like them to do, often then it's a shell game with them. So they're not going to take it out of the rainy day fund. They're going to short you somewhere else. And
Well,
so
they've done that in the past.
they've done that in the past, and so there are a lot of moving parts to it that would have to be analyzed. So I mean,
Assess the overall budget.
correct. So I want to say that your firm and straightforward commitment tonight that you've made, all of you. Now the question would be, is that sufficient at this time? I just don't know what a resolution would look like that would account for the possible contingencies that could happen, but, we could certainly try to run it up the flagpole to legal to see what that might look like. I'm just fearful that it would be so vague that it wouldn't really be
Yeah,
meaningful.
I'm not sure a resolution is appropriate, but we issue a lot of statements, we issue a lot of press releases. What would be the harm in boiling this conversation into a press release?
We have a State of the Schools coming up
That's all
on
I'm asking
Thursday.
for.
We have a State of the
Sure.
Schools
We
tomorrow
have a State
night.
of the Schools coming up tomorrow.
There you go. No, I agree with that. That's
I-
absolutely.
Perhaps perhaps something could be drawn up, and I think we're all hoping to be there. I hope everybody's going to be there. It's a good time, Heintz High. It's the most beautiful public room in northeastern Ohio. Thank you. Really, thank you. So perhaps we could even have
Someone
something.
can make a statement at that time.
So this is what I would like to do. I'd like to put it in Jody's hands. She's our leader, she's our president. You've heard what we've been able to say. You interface with staff. I mean, ideally, I'd love to see a press release. I'd love to see a statement. I'd love to see something concise in writing
Yes.
that can be distributed, that
Agreed.
can be, shown in a nugget. I would like to be able to have the anti-campaign use it. I'd like to be able to have the for-campaign use it.
Hold it against us.
I'd like to
Hold
just
up.
get it out.
Yes.
So, but
Okay.
I would like to, you're our leader.
All right, I will work with Liz and Kathan, and we'll come up with something.
Let's not tweet it.
We're not tweeting it.
Don't tweet it.
We're not tweeting it. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate the
Yeah.
confidence.
I mean, we are all in agreement about this.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, and thank you, Michael.
yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
And. Thank you. Yeah.
There you go.
And if I can squeeze a word in edgewise, thank you for your letter to the editor, too. I know you didn't have your 5 minutes, but Joan,
Yes,
it was a
Joan.
beautiful piece.
Yes.
So thank you. I was hoping you were going to read that. But, it's more than 5 minutes.
Sorry, maybe next time.
Okay, good, okay,
We're here,
good.
first Tuesday of every month, we're here. So
Good.
you're welcome. We always have public comments then.
Good.
So thank you, everyone, and we are going to move on to continue with our agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Kirby for the superintendent's report.
Okay, I'll give my report first, and then we'll do the policy readings. First, one thing I want to say in regards to Mr. Drake's comments and other people commenting. I am happily in the process of purchasing a residence in our district. I gave myself a 9-month timeline. I'm 2 months ahead. And I'm excited about it because we do work very hard, very early, very late, and on the weekends. And I'm excited to have a 3-minute commute. And, so for the record, I understand people's passion about the issue. It's something that's personally always been important to me, though not required, personally important. And so, I hope the record can reflect that so people can kind of calm down on that strain of the conversation. So, on to my.
Welcome.
Well, thank
Welcome to
you.
the community.
And I will, I'll be paying my taxes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
In addition to the RETA taxes, which was a new phenomenon that I learned about when I moved to Ohio.
Oh, you
And
didn't know
again,
about
welcome.
Rita.
What's RETA?
She's everybody's best friend.
Apparently. So we have a lot of great things happening in the district. As mentioned, the State of Our Schools presentation is tomorrow night. 6:00 p.m. we have a school showcase for all our schools, and then the formal program will begin at 7:00 p.m. So I look forward to seeing everyone there. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. It is our district, it is our community. We want people to know what's happening.
Liz, there's tours of the high school going on too, right, as part of that?
I don't know if there are high school tours. I know we'll have tables set up in the cafeteria for schools to share and show what they're doing.
And there will be some students there as volunteers, so if people are interested in doing
We can do that.
That's great.
some kind of like touring,
Okay.
couple floors, they can
Okay.
help out with that.
Since Kathan's not at the microphone, I'm just going to repeat that there will be some students available giving tours as part of that from 6 to 7. So please invite your friends and neighbors if they haven't had a chance to see the high school. I would love them to come to the State of the Schools and take their tour. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
As it relates to the work around the middle school equity, I did have the meeting with the Monticello students. They had some specific concerns, and we talked about the math class, we talked about arts, and the very passionate students. They had very clear recommendations for me. We do need another meeting because we did run out of time, and there are some folks from central office I'm going to bring to the meeting because there are specific things they were speaking to that would be good for other people to hear to add to our conversation. We are also excited that we have received national recognition for AVID for the performance of our AVID students on performance and enrollment in AP, CTE, College Credit Plus. So tell me if I'm saying it wrong, Bob, please correct me. 75% of our students have enrolled or credentialed in AP, CTE, or College Credit Plus.
So that's 75% of the
Of the
AVID
AVID
students.
students
That's great.
that last year. And nationally, that rate is 39% for
Wow.
AVID schools. So
That's
we are,
great.
that's really, really huge. The number was so good, we had to double check just to make sure it was, and it is accurate. So we're really excited about that. AVID is a great program and really rolls right into our college and career work. We are really excited. We have closed our application period for our college and career task force. We'll be kicking off in April. There is a lot of energy and enthusiasm, like a great pool of applicants as well. So we are really excited for that work to start. Bob will be leading that work, and I think, Jim, you're the board member who's on that task force, so we'll be giving you that information.
Yes, Jim.
That would
Yes.
be-
Yes, I am looking forward to that, actually.
We also have continued to do the Ed Services team are doing their second round of winter learning walks, which will be concluding soon. In addition to the work around data meetings, both with principals, with TBTs, with building leadership teams, and with the district leadership team as well. We did have our Heintz Family Academy just this past weekend. It was a really busy weekend. Heintz Family Academy, basketball game, Rock Stars fundraiser, Heintz Musical Feast, and then this weekend we have Annie. There's another basketball game. So there are other things. Braden mentioned those. So I mean, this is a really busy and engaged district, and that continues. And it's not even officially spring yet. And then finally, the intra-district transfer procedure has opened, and that will go between now and for the next 5 weeks. So that information is on the website. And I know some parents have questions about that. We want to make sure that they are informed and that they know that that process has opened up again. Last thing I want to mention, we have started doing some preliminary planning on the coronavirus that has been, certainly part of the national conversation. So we did send out a letter to families just letting letting them know the precautionary measures we're taking and giving them some reminders. But we also today convened a 3-member task force that are going to be our leads on this. So Kathan, our supervisor of communications, George, director of business operations, and Bob, curriculum director. So as we hear guidance, and if we need to coordinate plans, we have a team that's going to lead on that, because they all have the different lenses that we know we need to make sure all those pieces are addressed. So that concludes my report.
Can I ask a question about the final piece with the coronavirus? You know, we've built this wonderful partnership with the people at Metro. And so as you begin to, you know, that core group,
That's a good idea.
I wonder if we want to lean into that relationship at all, and then also include the voices of our school nurses to see if they have any specific needs or concerns, you know, because that's the front line, obviously. And, you know, the final thing is, you know, telling kids when to stay home, you know, that we are responsible for each other when we are in the community of the schoolhouse. So, just some initial ideas. But I really think the mental health piece in particular, that relationship needs to get stronger. And what a great opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you.
add that too
That'd
to
be
our
great,
team.
yeah.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. And I believe Dr. Lombardo is coming up to conclude the superintendent's report with some more policies to be read.
More policies. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Paul.
You have in front of you 19 board policies up for reading. You may recall our procedure and protocols is we have 3 readings before they are adopted, so no need to make a recommendation tonight. But you have the 19 policies that have been worked through our committee, and I wanted to see if you had any questions at this time. This would be considered the first reading.
I don't have any questions yet. I'm still working my way through them. I appreciate you giving us the printout.
Yeah,
It
the
was
hard
in everybody's inbox. If you haven't seen that, please
It's much
stop by
easier
and
to
get
work
your
with
inbox.
that,
Yes.
So,
great.
thank you very much. I'm about halfway through them, so I will have
Okay.
questions for you by the next meeting.
Excellent. And please send them through email as well, and I'll be happy to address those as well, okay?
Thank you.
Yes,
All
thank you.
right. Thanks.
Does anybody else have any?
No, same issue, like the big stack of paper is very helpful.
Great.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lombardo. All right, Mr. Gaynor, the treasurer's report.
All right. Well, the only thing we have for your consideration tonight is the 5-year forecast. Again, for those at home, we just want to make sure that everyone knows that the 5-year forecast, although it need only be approved twice a year, that this board is asked that they see the 5-year forecast every month, kind of keep that front and center, both in terms of transparency, but also in terms of long-term planning. So the 5-year forecast for this month is unchanged from the previous month, so we are in a holding pattern. If there are changes at the state level, then the next 5-year forecast you see will incorporate any of those changes if we're able to quantify anything at that time, but there are no changes this forecast to the one from the previous month. The need for the levy is still there, if that's a question. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Some unicorn didn't write in.
It did not
change
yet,
that.
not that
Not
I've
yet.
seen.
So, I mean, I really don't mean, it's a funny comment, but, I mean, it's so serious, and maybe I should be shamed for using the unicorn thing.
I don't think it minds.
Do you think the person that was sitting there who was holding up the 5-year forecast was trying to indicate we didn't need it, or we needed it earlier this morning?
Well,
I mean,
they weren't interested enough to stick around.
well, I mean, I'd much rather hear people tell us why we don't need the money. Except for pie in the sky things, but, okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we see is this incredible rise in the Ed Choice voucher line from 3 years ago to the projections, you know, to this year's actual numbers, to next year's projection of over 5 million. I mean, a lot of our other things have stabilized, but that one is just on a terrible trajectory.
Well, and we can't predict it.
Right.
We can't predict it.
And there may be another change in 2 years at the next state budget, which does something else we can't predict.
And it pulls us apart.
That too.
You know, it,
Yeah.
it pits neighborhood against neighborhood and public school against private school and voucher school against, non-voucher school, and not every private school is a voucher school, and and parents are just trying to make the decision that's best for their kids.
Which is what parents
are
should be
supposed to
doing.
do.
Yes.
And we have lived in beautiful harmony with all of those wonderful private schools for years and generations. And yet now, because of our leaders, go figure, we are being torn asunder because we are all like siblings trying to scratch and claw for our part of the family budget, And it's just so disappointing. It would be my wish that we would all take all of our energy and lobby in Columbus instead of lobby, against this or against that. Let's lobby for Ohio's kids, no matter whose desk they're sitting in. It doesn't, the idea of the state funding vouchers from the state's budget doesn't take away from anybody. It doesn't take away from the vouchers, the schools receiving vouchers. It just changes who writes the check. And so it would be a wonderful thing that I really think could happen in Cleveland Heights and University Heights, because we are such a wonderful community, that we could come together with that common vision of funding all of our schools in a way that is equitable and fair and doesn't pit us against each other.
Yeah, I find it very ironic that we're the epicenter of this issue when we're the one place in Ohio that has always had a rich array of educational choices for our community. It's really ironic.
And something that we rightly take pride in.
Right. So we need to vote to approve the 5-year forecast. Do I have a motion to approve the 5-year forecast?
So moved.
I will second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Mr. Heintz?
Yes.
Ms. Serini?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Okay, and now on to the board president's report, which is me. Just a couple of things that, first of all, I wanted to thank everyone who's been involved in the advocacy work. There was many staff members, board members, community members, children that go to our schools, and I just want to thank everyone. I know it was a long trip to Columbus. It was a long day, sitting there waiting your turn to testify. So thank you, everyone. I also want to thank the city of South Euclid. Their city council passed a resolution in support of our levy,
Yay.
and I really appreciate the support of our elected officials. Couple of other quick things. I wanted to talk about, we have received some correspondence, and there's been some comments requesting, at the forum, requesting a performance audit. It's one of those things, once again, we have not had the opportunity to discuss as a board, so I wanted to bring that up tonight. I have asked Mr. Gaynor to look into this and to contact the auditor's office. I understand that there is, from what I could tell online, there is a cost if your district is not in financial distress. Technically, we haven't met the financial distress threshold, so there would be a cost, so we need to find out what that would be. Also, I understand you have to be in line for one of these, so who knows how quickly it could even be done. I'm going to reach out to the Northeastern Ohio Board Presidents Group that I'm in and see if any other schools in our area have done this and, how effective the information was that they received. So I know that's something I'm going to do. I've asked Mr. Gaynor to do that as well. So I think it's worth investigating, at least the feasibility.
Yeah, we need to know what it takes, because it seems hard to justify spending money on something which won't necessarily bring back any useful information that we can act on. That's my worry.
That's why I want to reach out to some of the other school board presidents and find out, if they've done one, how useful the information was.
Right.
And
Because
then
having
also-
somebody tell us that we can save money by, buying school buses as part of a large buying group is not useful information, since we already do that,
Right.
Yeah, I think we've been through this before, but a generation ago.
Yes.
So I know all is possibly different. I'd like to understand what we learned as a district at the time, and if the effort was useful. I just sort of recall mumblings with former board members at the time that it wasn't a useful process. But I have nothing to hang that hat on, so I really would like to learn more about it. I'd like to know your opinion, Scott. We already used the state auditor. There was a time where we were going to, I think, try to use a private firm recently, but for some reason we couldn't. I mean, are there better options and are we really a candidate for this? I mean, this effort's pretty much being driven by the anti-levy vote, who claim that we spend too much money. But that's a lot of their comparisons I've noticed haven't been apples to apples comparisons when they make those claims. And I suspect those claims are being made because in reality, they just don't want to pay the higher taxes. And I get that. The taxes are high in our community. Putting this levy on the ballot, we are all concerned about it but our first interest has been the children and the community, and that's why I voted for this, to put it on the ballot, and I think most of you also felt the same way. But I'd like to know, really, what we've learned in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, and I think Cuyahoga Falls was mentioned in that one forum. Maybe a conversation with their treasurer to find out if the claim that we heard in the debate was actually accurate or not.
Okay, absolutely, and, I recall that, at that time, having been here for a while, and so absolutely I can report back on all those things that you've asked for, and, all of the performance audits, including the one that was done in 2000-ish or so in our district, they're all out on the Auditor State's website, so, it's not even necessarily having to reinvent the wheel. I've been able to go out and look at some of the performance audits for some of those districts that 91% are in fiscal distress. But to see South Euclid Lyndhurst, for example, and some other districts, and you can see some of the things that that the state consistently will put out there as possible options. For example, you don't transfer as much money to your extracurricular activities, or make changes to your health care, which requires obviously bargaining, or increase your class sizes. So there are some consistent themes that you see across those performance audits, but it's absolutely, to everyone's point, worth another look, feasibility study, and then we can report back on what we find. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple other quick things. I want to remind Superintendent Kirby that we need to get our board walkthroughs scheduled. That's something that we try to do every year, so if you can give us a time frame, and if I can remind the board, I would like all of us to visit a classroom and a CTE program as well. Also, I have a request from the City of University Heights. We need to appoint someone to their Technology Commission. So apparently, the board appoints someone to that, so we need to
What
do
does
that. I
mean?
get
We
more
appoint one of
information.
ourselves or a citizen?
No, it could be one of us, or it could be a staff member, or it could be a citizen. The requirements are very loose, other than they want somebody who has an interest and a knowledge of technology to serve on this committee. I'm not sure why the school board appoints them, but that is what was written in their original formation of the committee. So,
The previous person was Cal Zucker.
Oh,
I think, because of his background as the chief information officer, that he was the liaison to that committee, or the appointee of the board at the time.
So it doesn't have to be a University Heights person, then?
no, it does
No,
not
she
have to be a
doesn't.
University
Okay.
Heights resident. Nope, nope. So I think we need to take some names, or if we know of somebody who's interested, we need to make that appointment. I would like to get that done in the next month.
What does the University Heights Technology Committee do?
I will get the exact wording and get that to you guys, but I believe from the phone conversation I had that it's just looking at the city's technology needs. Are they up to date, making recommendations, kind of like our lay finance committee, but it's for technology. So
it
making
would
recommendations to the city
behoove
about.
that person to have a little bit of skill.
To have a knowledge of
Okay, yeah,
technology,
right, right,
yes,
okay.
yes, and
Just checking.
infrastructure, yes, yes.
So, You know, I mean, Christine Bauer comes to my mind.
Sure.
Immediately, she knows the technology. She also knows what the district is up to and what our, you know, what we have. You know, and so I guess it's also about what is this task force really tasked with?
Yeah,
So-
well, it's a commission, it's not a
It's
task
commission,
force.
thank you, sorry.
But I think they meet 4 times a year, maybe? But I'll get more specifics and get out to everyone. But I'd
Okay.
like to get this done in the next month. So, and then last thing, I just wanted to double check a date. In our winter retreat, we said that we would have our spring retreat April 16th. That's a Thursday night. We said we'd go like 6 to 9 or 6 to 10.
Oh,
I just wanted to double check if that date still works for everyone, or if we need to relook
the
at
date
that.
again?
April
Thursday,
16th.
the
It's a Thursday
16th.
night. We couldn't find a weekend date that seemed to work for us.
Board retreat, 6 to 9.
Yep.
Which date? April?
April
Also
16th.
baseball
April
practice for
16th.
Heintz,
Thursday.
in case anybody's wondering.
It's a Thursday night.
Thursday.
Yeah, it's in my
I
calendar.
have it on my calendar.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right. So that is everything from my
Middle of
report.
Passover, so, you know, no sandwiches for supper.
Okay.
Okay. So that's all I have on my report, so I will move on to the next item on our agenda, the board committee reports. Does any board committee have a report?
Well, not really officially under the board reports, no, committee reports.
Okay. Any unfinished business? Any new business?
I've got just a couple little notes.
Okay.
So I teach in Chardon, and we had a couple snow days. So I had the great pleasure of visiting Monticello and Roxborough and Delisle on Thursday. And I must say, it was great. I hadn't really seen the buildings up and running and in use. Last time that I was in the buildings was right before they opened. And so it was a great joy to see them full. And I just had such a fantastic visit. I was in a sixth grade language arts class where the students were preparing persuasive essays on a subject that they were passionate about. And there were fantastic topics, everything from what rights do pets have? Do pets have rights? To should students be able to have their cell phone at school? To dress codes, you name it. And it was just so much fun. And it was just such a great learning activity being directed by this amazing teacher, you know. And it's just like, boy, you know, when you're talking about the caliber of teacher that we have in our classrooms, it was a real joy for me as a middle school teacher. Sometimes it's fun to get wowed, and I was wowed. So that was a great experience at Monticello. I'm glad that we are still looking into the issue of the paint, because there is clearly, the paint's not holding on the walls as well as it should. And I know that we're working on that, and I appreciate that. It was the first time that I had seen it. So that's really important work to continue. When I was at Roxborough, again, it was just so nice to walk down the hallway and hear the music playing in the classrooms and just, again, see great stuff. Wonderful visit. And at Delisle, I couldn't have come at a worse time. I was in between the two sessions. So I got a great tour from Brian Williams, but I didn't get to see much, so I'm eager to go back. I had the pleasure of attending the Equity and Advocacy Conference hosted by the National School Boards Association in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. And it was such a wonderful experience. I learned a great deal. And I have to say, I came back feeling very proud of the work that we are doing here on both equity and advocacy. They ask for feedback about each one of the sessions. And my feedback was that this was a wonderful introduction to this issue in equity we really need a more advanced for those districts who are a step or two ahead of this. And it felt just great that as a representative of Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education, there wasn't much new in this session for me. So that was a great moment of pride. And finally, I promise, I had the great joy of attending the Heights Musical Fest, which was a fundraiser for BOPO. And our Heights musicians were performing with members of the Cleveland Orchestra. Wow, it was really cool. And so, you know, you kept walking around saying, bumping into people saying, some things only happen in Cleveland Heights University Heights. And this is just that sort of thing. And I also just wanted to give a real shout out of thanks to Brendan Ring, the owner of Nighttown, who was incredibly generous in hosting this wonderful event, this brunch. And those are my notes.
It was a lovely event.
It was a great
It was
event.
really a great
It was the
event.
first time they did it.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
was amazing.
And it was amazing.
I have a hunch that will be the first time of many.
Oh, for sure.
I was
They'll need a
not,
bigger space. It was full.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a brunch. They need to not run out of quiche. That was pretty funny. It's like,
It was a great event. I was unable to attend the event the night before at Rocks Arts. I wasn't feeling well that night, but I hear that was a very nice event as well. And I want to thank the folks who host that event, particularly since that now funds the Tiger Nation Fund, which is a fund that helps support arts at all of our middle school and elementary schools. So it's great. A lot of great things going on in our community.
So you mentioned earlier our students who went down to Columbus.
Yes.
And I want to shout out to these kids. They were amazing. They showed up before 6:30 on a Saturday morning so that I could drive them down to Columbus at 6:30, and they were on it the whole time. And then they slept the whole way back, which they deserved. But during the testimony, which we heard before it was our turn, they were listening, they were asking questions, they were texting back to Cleveland Heights to get answers to other questions, they were editing their speeches. It was just an amazing event, and they really learned how the process works, and they had a seminal part in it, and I was so proud of them.
And it was fun watching you on TV. I was watching it because I was there the day before. So I was
Right.
watching it from the comfort of my couch, and it was really fun to watch.
Anyway, so there were 7 amazing students.
They did great.
I was very proud of them.
They
The
did great.
videos are up on the website.
Oh,
On
cool.
the
Excellent.
homepage. Nice.
So hopefully nobody was squirming too much, because we did have to sit for an awfully long time.
Yeah, it was a long time.
And we got a real-time shout-out from our own state representative, Janine Boyd, who was watching online as well, so.
That was good.
Excellent, excellent. So any other new business?
Just a whole lot of upcoming stuff. You mentioned how busy things are, and, you know, just the rest of this month. There's the musical, there's swim cadets, the Career Tech Ed Advocacy Group is meeting on Monday, the 9th. The middle schools are having a joint PTA game night on Friday, the 13th at the Rec Center. Oxford is putting on a show also. What is it? Pirates Past Noon, which must be based on those books, right? And Lake Erie Inc. is having their big giant bananagrams event on the 14th, and Braden mentioned the college fair already on the 19th. So a lot going on, all of it fun.
And there is the Rally for Public Education on March 18th at the State House. It's a Wednesday, 3 o'clock start. If people can make it down, it's worthwhile. We need to continue to push,
And I'm sure there's carpooling happening.
so.
Any other new business, correspondence and announcements? I think we just covered a whole bunch of announcements.
Yeah, that's all my notes.
All right, well, then if there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Absolutely. Motion we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gaynor, will you call the roll?
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Mr. Posh?
Yes.
Mr. Heintz?
Yes.
Ms. Serini?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Good night. Thank you, everyone.